Reaching season 13 has put me firmly in obviously the Hinchcliffe era. Not only has Tom come in as the new Doctor, this is what many consider to be the golden era. And on this marathon so far, opinions have obviously differed. Doctor Who's a broad church. We all think and feel differently about it and certain elements of it. But with this being like what many consider to be the best Doctor Who has ever been, because that's not necessarily first of all my own opinion, like going into this, spoiler alert, but also my individual reactions to the stories may not have tallied with other people's experiences of this totemic era of the show. Maybe that means that emotions can run a bit high. Hello, welcome back to Marathon Man, where I'm going through Doctor Who from the very beginning, and you join me at, well, it used to be the only appearance of Sutekh, and now it's just the first appearance of Sutekh. I've always thought of this story as one of the very best examples in Doctor Who of how we all have our own individually unique experiences of the show. And so when I was younger and I was making my own way into connecting with it, I still hadn't got it all covered by the time I reached adulthood. And what that means is there are some stories that I came to for the first time knowing full well what their reputation was. Which isn't a problem when you're 8. You just watch a story, you either like it or you dislike it. And I was in my late teens before we got the internet in our house outside the hours of 6 p.m. and 10 p.m. so that I could start fully researching this show that I'd loved since I was small. So most of my teens saw me going in blind as well. I would watch a story, I wouldn't really know what the consensus was. Having the internet and starting being able to delve into the world of fandom, that's when I started to get an idea of which stories had been appraised in certain ways. Generally speaking, of course, that's never an exact science when it comes to Doctor Who, and that's as it should be. Each story speaks to someone. But having a better idea of which ones were more highly thought of meant that I could start to prioritise which ones I would experience next, based on how much I thought the chances were that I'd enjoy them. Enter Pyramids of Mars. I was at university and I'd set myself the ultimately doomed mission to polish off what I had left of the classic series before the shiny new version with Christopher Eccleston dropped the following year. This one was high up on my list of leftovers to watch purely because of its stellar reputation. But I came away slightly disappointed, and it wasn't that it was a bad story of Doctor Who, not at all, nowhere near the very worst. It's just that I couldn't really see why it had that reputation that it did. Why it had that reputation that caused me to think, I'm going to watch that one next. I didn't quite see it. And when this continued to be the case upon each occasional revisit, that's what led me to think, oh, this is a really good example about how everybody has a very different experience of this show. How it isn't an exact science, and that's as it should be. Now, when opinions differ on Doctor Who, as indeed they have on this marathon, what will normally happen is, on the whole, there'll be a constructive sort of rebuttal. With the Tom Baker era, and I feel like this is kind of holding true at the moment, with the Tom Baker era, certainly the early Tom Baker era, which I'll go on record now, and I mean I'm still working my way through it on this marathon, but I've never found it as unimpeachable as a lot of other fans. But when people try and offer those rebuttals, they feel more emotional than previous ones. So, for example, if I had something negative to say about, which I did, the Celestial Toymaker, and people disagreed with me, that became, there weren't like as emotional undercurrents to the disagreements. When it comes to Tom Baker and the Fourth Doctor, and certainly the Philip Hinchcliffe years, and specifically stories like Pyramids of Mars, they're charged with those first memories of watching them as a child. And I'm not saying it's gatekeeper at all, but what can happen is when if this has happened, if a comment is left which is, you have to understand at the time this was amazing. Okay, But you have to understand that that doesn't preclude somebody having an opinion about what they're watching. And if somebody can watch the William Hartnell years and utterly be enchanted by it, that's not really anything to do with not being able to see how television was made at the time. And my issues aren't that the Tom Baker, Philip Hinchcliffe years are bad, because they're not. I think this marathon is proving that. But it means that because I don't have the opinion that it's absolutely perfect and the best Doctor Who ever was, that's not coming from an unenlightened, entitled millennial brain. And with Pyramids of Mars, while I will say, because this does sound like I'm prefacing the fact that I'm going to be slagging Pyramids of Mars off completely, which isn't the case. And in fact, on this viewing, it's I started to see why it was so well liked without still liking it as much as that. The Pyramids of Mars is just a really good example because of how it's routinely put in certainly the top 5 of the Fourth Doctor stories, and sometimes even the top 10 of all. So I don't think it merits that, while still being very good. That's what I'm saying. This is my position on the Pyramids of Mars. It's good. It's not the best. I never really had anything against the Pyramids of Mars, not at all. It's just I accepted it as one I didn't like as much as everyone else, and then I moved on. Because some I absolutely adored as a child, that heady time when I didn't know any better, yet I still made up my own mind. Those ones sometimes turned out not to be well liked at all. So here was me having my own adventure through the show, and it didn't matter what anyone else thought of the stories. Just what I did. Now, the last marathon that I did, I was writing it all up on Gallifrey Base, and I realised as I was approaching Pyramids of Mars, one of the most loved stories of all time, that I was going to have to go into detail about why I didn't like it all that much. And I wasn't really relishing that, because it was one of the most highly thought of stories of all time, and I was going to have to, again, sort of like lay out comprehensively what it was that didn't click for me, when really the answer literally just was, just 'cause. And I knew that wasn't going to cut the mustard. But luckily, that viewing, I did sort of like start to come round to Pyramids of Mars. And this time I did come round to Pyramids of Mars, while still not fully agreeing with its exalted, heralded status. This time I see more of what other people see. So much so that I watched it twice. Let me explain. In a quirk of timing, just like Tales of the TARDIS dropped when the Mind Robber's turn came on this marathon, Suit Tech returned to the show just as I was getting ready to hit Pyramids of Mars. This meant that the Tales of the TARDIS with Ncuti and Millie, which aired between Legend of Ruby Sunday and Empire of Death, came at just the right time. And that also gives you an idea of how far ahead you might think I am in the watching in terms of these videos. I'm actually not. The gaps recently have been in the watching as much as the filming. So when I've been doing the videos, I've actually been catching up to where I was. In fact, in the interest of transparency, I'll tell you which one I've just finished. I've just finished The Robots of Death. So I am still a little bit ahead, but not as much as it might imply. Because I watched Pyramids of Mars back in, when would that have been? June or July? And after this viewing, while I did used to think that Pyramids of Mars was the best example for how different fans have different experiences of the show, I actually now think it's the best example of something else. Not only that we as fans have our own unique experiences and perspectives of the show, but those unique experiences and perspectives of the show aren't static. Unique though they are, they also morph and shift in yet further unique ways. And the shifting of that inexact science also turns out to not be an exact science. And that is as it should be. Because Pyramids of Mars is a good story. It seems obvious to say. I mean, most of you know that. It's incredibly well liked. That's formed the basis of this video so far. But it's taken me a really long time to see that. And now a big part of this is, I think, how I'm getting quite a lot out of Tom Baker and Elizabeth Sladen in this marathon. Watching their performances, and in particular watching Tom's improve to the point where he matches her. Yes, that way round. It's interesting to see him as the new boy, whereas she is the old hand. So defined is the Doctor-companion relationship that sometimes we forget the personnel in the show have a slightly different hierarchy. His first season was hesitant, whereas now he's up to her level, and it makes for a very entertaining dynamic between the two of them. Coming as it does towards the middle of his second season, and given how much attention I'm paying to this particular trajectory, Pyramids of Mars actually throws me quite a lot of bones. They are firing on all cylinders now, both individually and as a unit. And in the latter part of the story, there's like a really wonderfully understated exchange.
How do I look?
Must have been a nasty accident.
Don't provoke me.
This sort of byplay is crucial in cementing their friendship and investing us in their bond, and therefore in their characters. We want to see, and we need to see, how they are together in times of crisis. Now sure, we know they can save the day, but they don't need to stop being friends to do it. And indeed, there is a moment in this story where the Doctor loses concentration and he snaps a little at her as a result. Now, time-wise, this could have been played by Pertwee and Manning. Friends though they were, a moment like that could still have been a little bit jarring, given John's propensity to spit poison quite so readily. So when it arrives here, I do notice it, but it doesn't trouble me anywhere near as much as similar instances did with the Third Doctor and Jo. Because Baker and Sladen have, before our very eyes, been slowly but skillfully building a friendship that feels very real, even in times of heightened emotion and stress. So strong is their bond that I know he didn't really mean it and they're still friends regardless. Now, yeah, of course, some people have the same reaction to the Third Doctor's moments like that, and in fact actually said as much when I called them out. But Tom Baker is so much better at selling the fact that the Doctor didn't really mean it. And more importantly, I feel like he doesn't really mean it because I feel that Sarah feels that he doesn't. They really are tremendous together because it seems they've worked on the Doctor and Sarah's friendship as much as they have on anything else, which might have been something other Doctors and companions might have either taken as read or relied simply on their own friendly working relationship. Another case in point is their first scene in the TARDIS with the Doctor brooding. There's a slither of fan service in the callback to Victoria, but that isn't what makes this scene remarkable. Elizabeth Sladen counterbalances Tom Baker's solemnity perfectly, making lovely naturalistic acting choices such as her delivery of
Oh, I know your Time Lord.
You don't understand the implications.
It cheekily mocks the pretension of the name itself and the Doctor's sulking. And she also throws in a little levity as well, asking if Albert also wore the dress. All good stuff. It just feels like mates talking, even if one of those mates is in a foul mood. No, because one of those mates is in a foul mood. It's something that the pair navigate really well, and it works because we're in the company of actors who know precisely what they're doing. They're charming when they encounter the butler as well, the first encounter they have as they start to become involved with the supporting cast. And it's when this happens, in all of their stories actually, that Elizabeth Sladen and Tom Baker take their glorious work ethic and apply it to everyone else involved. They welcome them graciously and give them a lot to play off. Now, whether or not a guest cast seizes that and makes the most of it is up to the guest cast in question. I would suggest that the cast of Planet of Evil didn't make the most of it. Happily, the guest cast of Pyramids of Mars very much do, which means I have a far better time with this story than ever before. It's a circle. A decent performer to act opposite only makes an actor raise their game, and then the actor they're acting opposite does the same to meet them, and so on. And that's very much the case with this story. Narmin, for example, doesn't last very long, but he is very good. Calm and reasonable of voice when he looks skyward and claims the descent of the Purple One in such a way as he might comment on a rain cloud, it then becomes really unnerving and carries that chilling suggestion he doesn't think he's evil. And we don't usually get that in Doctor Who, not really. Obviously, you'll hear actors talk about it because it's a way of approaching the character, that villains don't always think that they're evil. But usually in Doctor Who, for simplicity's sake, the villains are villains and they behave villainously because the story needs a villain. In Narmin, though, we have a character who, without saying so, feels like he's acting on the side of righteousness. Now, this complexity is welcome, but it isn't half startling in how relevant it seems today. And as Sutekh himself, Gabriel Wolf's voice is just excellent. In the same way that Narmin is calm and reasonable, so too is Sutekh. It is an excellent decision to make him sound so calm because all of this is matter of fact for a villain, and that is what makes villains so frightening in real life. And given Sutekh's actual outlook on the universe, that makes total sense. And by harnessing that in the script and in the performances, we've got a really strong set of villains. I hadn't really expected my knuckles to crack as much as that, sorry. And it's a good move to harness this for the fantastic in Doctor Who, and it's easy to see why Gabriel Wolfe was asked back to be Sutekh when Sutekh returned to the show. And why they used him as the voice of the Beast in Tennant's first series. What a voice! Bernard Archard as Marcus and his commandeered corpse is great, hugely affecting as the latter as he stumbles over trying to appear human. And a zombified minion isn't all that interesting a part on the page, but he finds a really rich vein to surface in it. And Michael Sherd does an awful lot as the other Scarman, Lawrence. More than I've ever noticed before, actually, and he becomes involved in the story to the point that one almost forgets his brother's dead body is still walking around wreaking havoc. As used as we are to goodies versus the baddies, Lawrence's attempts to get Marcus back at his earliest opportunity have a very weighty and emotional impetus behind them. It feels like it's been quite a while since I've cared about a supporting character's arc as much as I have Lawrence's. Now, I award due merit to the script for that, but the real reason for it is down to Michael Sherd's performance. It's also quite jarring to realise that when he made Pyramids of Mars, he was actually younger than I am now. Having him as an almost de facto companion for the story works wonders in terms of Baker and Sladen bringing their respective A-games.
No.
The Doctor snaps as Lawrence mentions calling the police to help sort it out. Alien, yes. Scatter, yes. In control, definitely.
Are you telling me you don't know
What if I knew I wouldn't ask? Don't be obtuse, man.
He spits out later on, as well as relishing lines such as,
Well, you see, Mr. Scarman, I have the advantage of being slightly ahead of you.
"This is the best Tom has been since taking over without a doubt." Probably because he now has a handle on the role and its possibilities, but crucially, the implications of those possibilities. He's taking the alien, the eccentric, the traveller, combining them and realising that of course this would equate to wisdom. And so he adds the old man that Hartnell played to his bow. But he doesn't make it feel like it's a complete take-up. It's not like he's impersonating Hartnell. Basically, Tom has been quite overt with the eccentricities while he's been working out on the role, and I'm glad to see they haven't gone anywhere because they were such a great addition. But I would say from this point on, and possibly Planet of Evil actually, but season 13 definitely, Tom Baker is sort of adding the age of Hartnell. Because I did say when I was covering season 12 that I did detect a fair few Hartnellisms in how he was playing the Doctor. When it comes to season 13, he's adding that, like I say, the old man, not just the bits of the first Doctor, but the age of the character. And maybe that's because he directly addresses it being 750 years old, having a bit of a moan about that at the beginning of this story, possibly. But maybe that being in the script has given Tom this idea to pursue that in his performance, and it works wonders. He approached the role slowly, but he's there now. And even though he still continues to add layers to his Doctor, which I really appreciate. Now that wisdom he's realised would be there isn't delivered as wisdom, because he knows the Doctor would just know these things without always showing off or patronising all the time. And it's here that I notice and relish how he approaches sci-fi gobbledygook.
Yeah, it isn't. It's the entrance to a time-space tunnel.
And quite rightly, he makes that sound like it's the most normal thing in the world. Pertwee, Troughton, and maybe even Hartnell would have delivered that deduction as something crucial, something important, something that merited a grand delivery, and maybe even a pose to go with it. Baker, on the other hand, throws it away, and rightly so. We're still seeing him mark himself out from those three, while at the same time still occasionally borrowing from them. It's such a fun thing to watch. And if I wanted further proof of how comfortable he is as the Doctor now, there's the radiant benevolence when Lawrence enters the TARDIS, followed swiftly by the lesson to Sarah about how the future can change if they don't do something to stop it. He's now confident enough in the role to spin both plates simultaneously. The friendly alien and the terrifying Time Lord within 30 seconds. 4 for 4 on the Doctor front, most definitely. But it can't just be Baker and Sladen that carry the whole thing, can it? Yeah, I mean, they do a lot of the heavy lifting, but no, there's a lot more going on in Pyramids of Mars than I'd noticed in the past. The whole thing is paced really, really well. Now, we can take that for granted in episodic television, such as Doctor Who, but when that happens, when a story is structured well enough to have a decent and consistent pace to it, the cliffhangers feel organic and not bolted on, which is what happens here. Each episode ends with the plot advanced further still, and with a genuine moment of peril. The stock footage at the beginning is also a wise move because it really, really lends context. And in fact, actually, just the discovery of the tomb is a really nice opening. And it does feel like we're in a new period of the show's life now, which is imperative because the show It's what? It's in its 13th year. It's over 12 years old now, and it needs to move forward. Otherwise, it's going to wither. And it did feel a little bit like season 12 was reluctant to do that. Season 13 is definitely marching forwards, I think. Throw in a winner of a Design with the Mummies as well, and we've got a story that I have had very wrong in the past. Now, like I've said, I'm now more on the way to seeing what's so special about Pyramids of Mars. I still don't think it's like god tier Doctor Who like a lot of people do. If the reputation for Pyramids of Mars was this is actually really, really strong stuff, and it's a really good example of this, and this, I'd be fully on board. But like I say, it routinely manages to be in like the top 5, top 3 maybe of Fourth Doctor stories, and sometimes top 10 of all time. And I can't quite see that yet. Maybe that will change in the future, but for now, Pyramids of Mars, strong, really strong, but not the strongest. But I am grateful that after 413 episodes, the show is still surprising me in what of my own long-held opinions can, continue to shift. And the thing is, I shouldn't really be that surprised that as fans, our own unique perspectives and experiences on Doctor Who aren't exact sciences, because that's what magic is. And now, where once Sutekh was destroyed, now he just lies in wait for Donna to reawaken him again years and years and years from now. That initial scene in the TARDIS with Sarah in Victoria's dress and the Doctor in a mood. The most unlikely character in fiction becomes instantly grounded just because he's having a sulk to his mate. Just like the rest of us. Might it be Sutekh's bum hand? No. I think I may go for the CSO at the end of part 4. Obviously, the omnibus edition that came with the repackaged with the new Tales of the TARDIS bookends had updated effects, and they edited out Sutekh's the hand of Sutekh. But I still prefer the original. But I would still say that those effects are the least successful element of it. As ever, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this skirmish with Sutekh, then you know how YouTube works. Please do give it a like and share it around. I'd be super grateful. It'd be great to get as many Doctor Who fans along for the marathon as possible. And what do you think of this one? Is it one of Doctor Who's all-time greats? Or like me, do you still think that it might be a little bit overrated? Was Sutekh working best as a one-off villain, or was he ripe for the return he eventually got? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you back here soon for the final appearances of Harry and Benton. So, if you don't want to miss that, hit the subscribe button, clang the cloister bell, and I'll meet you in Devesham. Or will I?